poet, Rabindranath Tagore, had questioned the power and legitimacy of nationalism in a dramatic way. And that book is still in circulation for various reasons. We have not outgrown that. And this book is still has something to tell us about nationalism. You know, when Rabindranath Tagore was invited in Japan, he was hailed as a great hero. But when he deliberated upon the subject of nationalism, he was disliked by people because he was speaking against nationalism. And therefore, when he returned, many people would be surprised to know only 3-4 people came to see him off. This is Rabindranath Tagore, who was being pushed aside because he had spoken about nationalism in a manner which did not suit that temperament or spirit of the time. People were rushing towards nationalism. People were looking upon nationalism as something which will give them power, freedom, and all kind of possible great future. Everything was good in nationalism. But here there was a man who was talking about the dangers inherent in nationalism. Many people would be surprised that even Gandhi was not a great supporter of nationalism. And his guru, if I may say this, Tolstoy was extraordinarily critical of nationalism. So I'm reminding all these things to you just to start the ball rolling towards where I want you to go and see why nationalism is helping communalism to survive. Something which may be slightly difficult for people of this generation to understand because they believe that nationalism is sacred and communalism is evil. And my thesis, which most of the work I did in 90s, when this Babri Masjid and Ram Janmabhoomi debate was actually gaining ground, I would like to share with you that I was working on political mobilization. But in JNU, where I had been studying, some of my friends rushed in to inform me that Gazab ho gaya. Something unimaginable had happened and a Babri Masjid had been demolished. Then and there, you believe it or not, I decided to quit my subject and start working on communalism. Why communalism is so very important and still becoming so very powerful in India that the entire Indian political scenario is being in a way captured by the possibilities which is emanating from the political ideology of communalism, against which for century, for about 100 years, our intelligentsia, our educated people, our leadership had fought against. And the book that came out had argued in a way that when, basically in one line, if I may put it, allow me to do that, that nationalism was in formation and communalism was also being in formation alongside. So both these ideologies are intertwined. You are making nationalism and you are creating the possibility of communalism. And this was happening in late 19th century when we were groping towards the ideology of nationalism. When I say this, I am going against the tide because historical scholarship has still maintained that communalism was born in 1920s, when a particular kind of propaganda, quote-unquote propaganda, started in 1920s, in which the communities were seen along religious lines, and thereafter one kind of a political programming was done, which saw the entire society in a clearly demarcated two halves, one Hindu, another Muslim. Now, this is where I think I should push my argument further and say that if the beginning had been made of communalism, it was done in 19th century itself with nationalism. But this is a difficult thing to work on, because we have been trained in such a way that we can not actually see these two phenomena, two ideologies fused together. And this fusion is so very invisible from outside that for a common man, it is very difficult to understand that what Jinnah was saying in 1940s was not very different from what great Congress leaders had been saying all along. It is very difficult for them to understand that. For them, it is very easy to understand that Gandhi and his followers were trying to create a united India, and this man who is Jinnah, he actually lured the Muslim leadership towards an idea, a utopia called Pakistan, and thereby he created so much pressure on the Indian national movement that ultimately they agreed to see the partition happen. It's a very simple thing to make them understand, because in that connection the whole framework is like this. Gandhi and his followers were trying to get national unity, and Hindus and Muslims should work together. A national movement was going on with twin objectives. One was to throw the Britishers out of India, and another was to bring Hindus and Muslims together. This is one what is called what can be called meta-narrative of national movement. But this meta-narrative has its own limitations, and that is why we need to go back and see how things developed the way it developed actually at the ground level. Now, if we start the discussion, one point I have already made is that the beginning had been made in 19th century when nationalism was being shaped up, created. And in that connection, we also need to say that there were other attempts also, which we call reform movements, where religious leaders had also been trying to reform their societies. If you see it very closely, you will find that all the religious leaders of different types were trying to do good things. Whether it is Arya Samaj leaders, or it was Brahmo Samaj leader, or even Aligarh movement leader, Syed Ahmad Khan and all these people were doing great things, good things for their respective communities. But as my teacher Bipan Chandra used to say, there is a kind of tendency that once you start thinking in terms of community, you get a slide. You start as a good Muslim or a good Hindu or a good Arya Samaji, and at a later stage you subconsciously or in a process becomes the votary of a soft communal ideology. And this is a very critical argument. This is a very significant argument. You are saying that no, I am doing no harm to anybody. I am thinking only about an upper caste Brahmin man. What is wrong with that? Everybody has the right to think along the caste lines. Everybody has the right to think in terms of caste, of whichever caste he belongs to, or the region for that matter he belongs to. Region is also significant. I'll come, if I remember this promise to you, in the latter half when I will talk about what is happening in Bengal. And if I miss that, you can ask me the question so that I may share with you what is happening in current Bengal. But anyway, at this point, I would say that a kind of slide had begun in late 19th century. In 1917 to 21 phase, India tasted a new kind of political water. When I say this, please remember that India was political even before, but in between 1917, 18 and 21, India becomes political in a very different way. Gandhi comes and he brought large number of people into the process. And the interesting point is that the mob or the crowd which made its impact from the early stage was not the Hindu crowd, it was the Muslim crowd. People do not understand that it was the beginning of the Indian political process in which people spoke assertively, even if as crowd did not begin with Hindu crowd, it began with Muslim crowd. We don't want to talk about it. And often whenever we refer to this phenomena of coming of people into the process, we normally tend to draw the attention of people towards Khilafat movement. That was the point where Muslim people got involved. Large number of works are being done these days, only to find faults in Muslims. I know, I'm aware that large number of people are blaming Gandhi for bringing and making Muslims militant during that phase. But I would like to begin the story slightly earlier. And this crowd is the Bombay Muslim crowd. What happened there? What happened there is very interesting. Muhammad Ali Jinnah is organizing a meeting, national convention of Muslim League in Bombay. Muslim League conference is being held in Bombay, and entire local Muslims were opposing Jinnah, saying that who is he to represent us? He is a dalal of Congress. He is putting Congress leaders on the dais. He is a Shia. He is not our representative. The Muslims get out that conference and said that this man does not have the authority to organize a conference in Mumbai. This is a peculiar situation. In Mumbai, Muhammad Jinnah is unable to hold his meeting. So what Jinnah did is extraordinary. He was an intelligent man. I am getting fascinated by the person who started as a nationalist Muslim, then thought of a liberal kind of framework, and then moved towards Congress and tried various things. Ultimately dejected, and in order to teach lesson to the people who represented Congress, he ultimately took a stand, which ultimately led to a very different kind of political process, you all know. But in the last phase of his career, he repented that. And that private repentance is not recorded these days, and that is why we tend to believe that Jinnah was a kind of villainish character, at least for this part of India, which he was not. He was representing a particular kind of historical force, but that is a different story altogether. This Jinnah is unable to hold a meeting in Mumbai, his own town, where he has large number of people as his supporters, and he managed somehow to do that because the people who had gheraoed them did not understand English. It was allowed to happen because they thought that these people are speaking something which is not against Muslims. On next day, when it all came out in Urdu newspapers and they found out that these things had been said, they became furious. Jinnah had to leave that place for his safety. This is the power of people who are coming into the meetings, assemblies. Now, phase 2. Now, Gandhi has actually understood the power of these people. And there is a historian, I would not name her rather, because she is an abused person that way, and she is believed to have belittled Gandhi. She has argued very persuasively. There are two lady historians who have argued how Gandhi was made the national leader largely because of the Muslim crowd support. Muslim crowd support. You will find it very interesting that Muslim crowd made Gandhi the national leader. This kind of argumentation is not very familiar to students at least. But if you read Judith Brown and others I am not mentioning here because somebody has worked on Khilafat movement and so on and so forth. What we miss in that process is that Gandhi was not the automatic choice of the national leadership. He was not the automatic choice. He was, when he was given the option of becoming the leader of India in Amritsar Congress, he was very hesitant. He said, no, I'm not going to be the leader of it. Ultimately, he went to Jinnah, who was there, and asked Jinnah whether should I take this responsibility or not. And Jinnah said, yeah, go ahead. And then Jinnah came to the dais and he called Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, who came from the same region where from Jinnah came. He said, Mahatma Gandhi. So there were two people, in fact three people, Tagore, Motilal Nehru and Jinnah. These three people called Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi as Mahatma in the initial phase. This is how the story began. Later on what happened you all know, I don't need to touch upon that. But what happened when Gandhi was called Mahatma by Jinnah and Gandhi becomes the real master of Indian politics, in between something had happened. And that thing is not discussed much. And I think I should bring that into your notice. Gandhi is creating a new group of Indian leaders who would lead the Indian national movement in a new way, in a more centralized way. Old leadership had been put aside. All old leaders were uncomfortable with new kind of politics which Gandhi was bringing in. But he needed people like Jinnah. And he approached Jinnah in various capacities. If you read those letters, you would understand that Gandhi and other people are expecting that in this situation, either you come with us or you become irrelevant. And that message was very clearly passed over to all leaders. Many leaders did not accept the leadership of Gandhi and they were now marginalized. That includes Annie Besant and Banerjee, Surendranath Banerjee and many others. Chittaranjan Das also got marginalized in some ways, but with good rapport with Gandhi. Tilak also was very, very uncomfortable. You all know. And Tilak and his associates always remained very critical of Gandhi. Now, why I am bringing all these issues into this discussion of nationalism and communism? Because I believe that there is something which needs to be shared with the students of history. And there are two very significant points about which we should talk about very openly. One is that Gandhi started a new political movement with new people. And in this new group of people, he needed Jinnah. He wanted Jinnah. But Jinnah was apprehensive about this new politics. And Jinnah said very categorically, look, this crowd which is yelling for you is not going to be with you for a long time. They are doing it for their own purpose. They are being led to this movement because of other consideration, not your national consideration. Clearly he writes it. Do not accept this support as the real support which will sustain your national movement. And he clearly writes that. He tried to fight against this line of this line of movement which was led by Gandhi. And in Nagpur and in this Calcutta, you will find a lot of materials where people, Muslims, remember, 10,000 Muslims were shouting against one frail man called Jinnah. Think of the courage he had. He could have sided, he could have got silent, but no. He tried to oppose Gandhi's line of thought. And that is where I think Jinnah's intervention must be given due attention. Jinnah opposed Gandhi, and Gandhi went with Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali led movement. Gandhi had his own reasons. I will not go into that. Gandhi had his own intention. He had done it with good intentions, with intention that somehow we will have a kind of solidarity which is absent in the earlier period. Why it was absent, this is another topic of discussion. Gandhi's intentions were good, but it backfired. It backfired. Let us admit that Khilafat movement initially started with Hum. Hum means Hindu, Ma stands for Musalman. Hum. Shraddhanand joined saying a large number of people joined with the hope that this will lead to the unity we had all along been working at. But what happened thereafter? After 1.5 years, we find that there was the beginning of communal riots. And these communal riots must be understood in the proper context. We often refer to this phase that communal riots began in India after Khilafat movement petered out. We tend to see this. But why did it happen? What is the real background? People don't really try to discuss that. There was something which was breaking, which was being broken at the grassroots level. What had actually happened? You see, this Khilafat movement, a non-cooperation movement, had been divided into two halves, Muslim phase and Hindu phase. Now, if the Muslim phase witnessed all kind of participation of Muslims and Hindus, some Hindus, in the second half, Hindus had been more prominent, Muslims participation was little less. Now, here emerges another group of Muslims which we call nationalist Muslims. The trauma and anguish of nationalist Muslim is something about which history is silent so far. What had happened to them? They had faith in Gandhi and his intentions. They believed that he is not working for Hindus. He is working for both Hindus and Muslims. And around that theme, nationalist Muslims became followers of Gandhi with the hope that this man is going to lead us to a better future where our religion will also be protected, our culture will be protected, our language will be protected, and they followed Gandhi. But from 1922 to 36, this is the 14 years time, during which these nationalist Muslims realized that they had nowhere to go. Neither the community people are with them, nor this Congress, which had been overtaken by Hindu elements, powerful Hindu elements. They were nowhere to go. And that is something which needs to be probed as a student of history. So Muslim-Hindu politics started in 1920s. Inqilab Zindabad. You all know Hasrat Mohani. You know large number of people who were leftist in orientation with Congress. Usmani, I would name one or two. I would not have the time to go into that history, how these people had been working, doing things, and imagining that India cannot be seen in a divided way. I mean, Hindus and Muslims. But something extraordinary happened at that time. We all know Shuddhi and Sangathan. We all know a man wrote Hindutva and therefore, in a way, started thinking about Indian history or Indian politics in a very communal way. This is we all familiar with. But what we are not familiar with something is going to be discussed today. In Calcutta, this has never been spoken about. That is why, please listen carefully. Muhammad Ali was made President of Congress. He delivered a lecture in 1923. In that lecture, he said something which irritated Hindu nationalists and Congress Hindu leaders like Malaviya. They thought that Muhammad Ali is going towards a communal line. He is behaving as if he is a Muslim leader first and a national leader later.